Welcome to the Progress Zone podcast, where we help you create real momentum in your mindset, business, health, and life. I'm your host, Jody Donaldson, and every week we'll explore the small, intentional steps that lead to big, lasting growth. This isn't about hype, it's about habits. So let's get started. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the Progress Zone. A while back, I did an episode about who you're practicing becoming. Today, I want to talk about the flip side of that idea. I want to start with something that happened to me early in my real estate career. I had just left law enforcement, and the habits that made me effective in that world, the discipline, the structure, the chain of command thinking, I brought all of that with me. And for a while, it worked. I was organized. I was reliable. I followed the process. But at some point, I hit a ceiling, and I couldn't figure out why. Because I was still doing everything the same way, same habits, same approach, same mindset. The problem was, that was exactly the problem. The version of me that got me there wasn't the version I needed to get me to the next level. And that's what I want to talk about today, because I think a lot of people are living inside that same ceiling right now, not because they're lazy and not because they're not talented, but because the version of themselves that created their current success is quietly becoming the thing standing between them and what's next. Here's how it usually shows up. You've worked hard to build something, a career, a business, your reputation, a way of operating. And at some point along the way, it worked. You figured out what got results. You built your identity around it. And that's not a bad thing. That's growth. But here's what nobody tells you. The same strengths that carried you to one level can become the exact things that cap you at the next. The leader who built their career on being the expert in the room now struggles to let their team lead. The entrepreneur who hustled their way to early success now can't slow down enough to build systems. The person who learned to stay self-reliant because they had to now has a hard time asking for help when they need it. And none of these are character flaws. They were survival skills, and they worked. And that's exactly why they're so hard to let go of, because you can't argue with something that worked, but something that worked then doesn't always work now. I call this identity ceiling, and it's not a skills gap. It's a knowledge gap. It's a willingness to let go of a version of yourself that no longer fits where you're trying to go. So why is it so hard to let go of an old version of yourself? Even when part of you know it's time to evolve, I think it comes down to three things. The first is identity. When something has worked for a long time, it doesn't just become a habit. It becomes a part of how you see yourself. And changing it feels less like updating a strategy and more like losing a piece of who you are. The second is fear. Not the dramatic kind. It's the quiet kind. The kind that whispers, what if the new approach doesn't work? What if I lose ground trying to find new ground? And so instead of risking it, you keep doing what you know, even when what you know is starting to cost you. And the third, success is validating. When something works, your brain files it away as safe. So every time a new challenge shows up, your brain reaches for what worked before, even if that chapter is over. So how do you know when you're hitting that ceiling? You keep working harder, but the results aren't matching the effort. The things that used to energize you have started to feel routine or heavy or both. You find yourself defending the way you've always done things more than you're questioning them. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a version of yourself that knows something needs to shift. And I want to say something clearly here. None of this means you're failing. It just means you're ready. Growth doesn't announce itself with a clean invitation. It usually shows up as friction, as restlessness, as that quiet feeling that something needs to change, even when you can't fully name what it is yet. That feeling isn't a problem. That feeling is a signal. It starts with one honest question. Is this approach still serving where I'm trying to go, or just where I've been? That question alone will surface a lot, because when you actually sit with it, you start to see which habits are still moving you forward and which ones have quietly become your comfort zone wearing a disguise. I had to learn that in real estate. The structure that made me effective coming out of law enforcement eventually needed to give way to something more creative, more entrepreneurial. And that transition was uncomfortable because I was letting go of something that had worked. But on the other side of that discomfort was growth I couldn't have reached any other way. Every version of you that you've outgrown did its job. It got you here, and that matters. But staying attached to it past its season isn't loyalty to who you are. It's resistance to who you're becoming. So this week, sit with one question. What is one belief, one habit, or one way of operating that helped me get to where I am, but might be keeping me from where I want to go? The next version of you is already waiting. It's just on the other side of letting go. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who thinks they might be ready for that next level. And keep showing up, keep doing the work, and keep making progress. And I'll see you next time inside the Progress Zone. Thanks for joining me in the Progress Zone. If today's episode gave you a spark, share it with a friend, subscribe, or leave a quick review. And remember, progress isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. I'm Jody Donaldson, and I'll catch you next time inside the Progress Zone.